Hey, good morning, Master Coaches. It's Miles here. Welcome to Master Coach. Great to have you here with us. I'm really excited for this journey that you are all on. In this particular session, what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through really what to expect for the next 3 days. And I'm also going to be teaching you some really important things that you need to know before you get into session. A bit like joining the gym. Before you start, you want to have a warm up. So this particular session that I'm going to be taking you through now, see it as your warm up before we get into the main session. So what we're going to be working on over the next 3 days is what we call the lifestyle coach method. As you all know, when it comes to building a successful life coaching business, whether that is for an income or whether that is just to help people and make a difference, whatever that is, there are effectively 5 things that we need to know and do. Just to remind you of these from our foundation training. Number one is obviously we've got to have our own coach. Every coach needs to have their own coach if we want to be successful as a coach. Rookie coaches often do not have their own coach. And the problem is if we don't do that, obviously it is inauthentic, it's out of integrity. We want to make sure that we walk the walk. We don't just talk the talk. Most successful coaches in the world will obviously have their own coach. You're going to be having time this weekend, especially today, where you're going to be being coached and coaching. Number two, we need a system. We need a process, a program, a methodology, a roadmap. We need to know how to take people from where they are, maybe stuck in their life, a lack of clarity, to being unstuck and to getting to the transformation which they ultimately want, which is maybe for them is to achieve a goal or an outcome or career progression, or just to take their life to the next level in general. Obviously, we've got a program, a system, a methodology to work through to do that. This next 3 days, you're going to be going through and starting to practice this coaching system. Hopefully by now, some of you have had some practice of this already with your practice partner. If you haven't, then you're going to be doing that on this training. Number three, we need to know how to fill our diary. We need to know how to market our coaching. We'll be teaching you that over the next 3 days. Number four, we need to know how to sell our coaching in a way that isn't salesy, obviously. And number five, we need to know how to scale our coaching so that we can serve one to many, because otherwise we don't really have a lifestyle. We're going to have a job which feels like a business, but actually, from my experience, it then becomes just another version of working because you're coaching every hour under the sun. So we're going to be teaching about that as well. So here's what we're going to be covering today. Day one, we're going to be really looking at the art of coaching. We're going to be going through the master steps of coaching, the psychology of coaching, how to sell coaching, and then you're going to be coaching and you're going to get coached as well. You're going to be in breakout rooms in the next hour. And most of the day today, our focus is going to be really on building your confidence as a coach and also having you ensure that you also walk the walk. And we're going to get you some coaching as well. Day two, you're going to be with me all day. I'm going to be teaching you the 6-figure roadmap. I'm going to be teaching you how to make £100,000 in your first 12 months as a coach, what you need to know to do that, if that's your intention. I'm going to teach you how to choose the right niche for your coaching. I'm going to teach you how to market your coaching. And then there's going to be some time for some hot seat mentoring as well. So there's going to be time for you to, if you wish, have some one-to-one time with me and get you some mentoring. And then day three, we've got a couple of special guests. We're going to be teaching you the business of coaching, what the top 1% of coaches do different, high performance coaching habits. You're going to have a chance for an Ask Miles Anything Q&A. So any of your questions you have over the next 3 days, you're going to have a chance to answer them. And then at the end of the day, we're going to have our certification, celebrate the fact that you've become a certified coach. And we'll talk about what is your next steps. Because some people have asked the question, what happens after the 3 days? How can I work with you further, Miles? And we'll obviously be talking about that on day 3 as well. So we're going to move now into the 5 master steps of coaching. Okay, so when it comes to the art of coaching, I found there are 5 really key fundamental things that we need to know and do to be successful. Most rookie coaches do not know these. And if you don't know these, it can make it very difficult for you to build a coaching practice, make it very difficult for you to get the transformation that you're after. But the most successful coaches in the world understand that there really is an art to coaching. And there's a way of doing it. There's a way of not doing it. And I believe that once you know these master steps, it's really going to make this first day, especially when you're in your breakout rooms, when you're coaching, it's going to make it a lot easier for you and a lot simpler for you to understand what it is that you need to be doing to be successful as a coach. So first, here's what we're going to look at. We're going to look at deep listening. So we're going to look at deep listening. Number 2 is eliciting. We're going to break down what that means. Number 3, we're going to talk about challenge. Number 4, we're going to talk about leadership. And number 5, we're going to talk about strategy. So let's start with deep listening. When it comes to deep listening, there are some fundamental things that we need to know and do. The first, it's really important, and by the way, many of these things are going to be very common sense, but very uncommon in practice. It's really important that when you're coaching, that you really are present. I often say that what kids really need from us is not presence with a C-E, but what they really need is presence with a T. They need us to be present. And so what that means in a coaching setting is what that means. Sorry, I got that the wrong way around. What that means in a coaching setting is it's really important that when you're coaching a client, that you're not on your phone, that you're not texting, that you don't have other tabs open, that you're not in a space where you may be disturbed. It's really important that you're giving your client your absolute undivided attention as if they were your first love or as if they were your child. If you've got children, you'll understand what that means. Number 2, this is one of my most important things. I think the most successful coaches in the world do this very well. I think the rookie coaches in the world do this badly. Is you've got to be comfortable with the silence. So here's one of the things I've learned about coaching. If you really want to stand out as a coach, if you really want to be seen as one of the best coaches in the world, you've got to get comfortable with the silence. Here's what I mean by that. When I first started coaching, what would often happen is a client would say something and I would be waiting to respond. Here's the problem with that. Most people go through their life in a conversation, and maybe you can relate to this, where they're speaking and the other person is waiting to respond. If you are waiting to respond, you become like everybody else in their life, which means that you're not different from the people that are in their life. Now, when you're coaching a client and you're comfortable with the silence, it's incredibly powerful. Here's why. Because most people are uncomfortable with silence. And so when you create a space for the client to think after they've said something, you allow them to process the information. Because what often happens with rookie coaches is they ask a question, the client responds, and then the coach asks the next thing. But here's the thing. When somebody says something, they need to first say it, and then they need often 7 to 8 seconds to actually process what they've said. So here's how you become comfortable with the silence. I may ask a question like this to a client. I may say, so, Susan, what is it you really, really want? Like, in general, like what is at your core? What is it you really, really, really want? And then I'll leave a pause. Susan will give an answer. And let's say she says something like, what I really want is to just have more free time with my kids. Here's what most rookie coaches do. Susan, what is it you really, really, really want? I really want more time with my kids. Oh, yeah, cool. Yeah, I get it, Susan. Okay, so, and in addition to more time with your kids, what else is it? That's what I mean by most rookie coaches. That's what they'll do. Here's how the most successful coaches in the world do it. Susan, what is it you really, really, really want? What I really want, Miles, is I want more time with my kids. I really felt that, Susan. Here's what happens when you do that. Not only do you give the client space to really process what they've just said, straight away they're like, wow, nobody in my life gives me that much space to just be me and speak and think. So what you need to do in these breakouts today is you need to make sure that you leave space. So here's how you know when you need to leave space. If you hear something that feels profound to you as a coach, leave space. I remember when I first started doing this with clients, I remember having clients regularly say, Sorry, Miles, are you still there? To which I said, I am. And what you said sounded really important. And I didn't want to just step on it. So hopefully you'll get that leaving long pauses isn't just for effect. It's so that the client can really process what they've said. Next, build safety and trust. Another part of deep listening is when you create the space by being present, by being comfortable with the silence, you're starting to build safety and trust. And the more safety you can build by being more silent, by being more comfortable with being present, by just really deeply listening, the more confident the client will be in opening up. Next, be curious. So I believe there's a difference between listening and hearing. So sometimes there might be a client says something. Let me try and think of an example off the top of my head. The client might say, you know, I'm really happy in my job. Now, I don't know about you, but when I said it like that, I immediately just thought, nah, that person's not happy in their job. Yeah, I am happy in my marriage. That inflection in the tone, for me, I'm curious about that. So I might say something like, pretend the person's Susan. Let's just stick with Susan. Susan, I'm really curious. Something about the way, the inflection in your voice. I'm really happy in my marriage. Can I ask you, is that completely true? Now, that might not be part of the framework that we've given you, just so you know, team. It's really important that you know that the framework that you've been given is a guideline. That doesn't mean that you have to follow it word for word, verbatim. So there might be a point where you're on the framework and there's the next thing to say, but they've said something and you're curious about what they've said. So you might want to say, is that really true? So if you're curious, kind of like kids get curious, play with that. If you've heard something and you're like, tell me more about that. The framework is a guide. It's not there to be treated as like you have to follow it word for word. And then finally is listen for insight. I think a lot of this is overlapping. A lot of this is the same thing said a different way, but it's listen for insight. So listen for tone of voice. It's not just about what they say, it's about how they say it. So really pay attention to what's unsaid through the tone of their voice. Stephen Covey says, most people do not listen with the intent to understand. They listen with the intent to reply. Okay, number 2, eliciting. When it comes to eliciting, there are 5 things that we need to know and do. Number 1, dreams and fears. Here's what we need to know. There's a difference between rational fear and irrational fear. Rational fear is you're in a zoo and you hear a zookeeper shout, run! Irrational fear is the fear of public speaking. There's not actually death. But the brain doesn't know the difference between rational fear and irrational fear. And often it's just as scary to go for our dream than it is to move away from fear. Sometimes it's just as scary to start this journey of becoming a coach as it is the fear of not going for it, or the fear of staying in a job that you don't enjoy. So what you want to do is you want to get confident at drawing out what people's biggest fears are and what their dreams are. And just so you know, the coaching framework is going to do a lot of this for you. Another thing I really want to do is I really want you to really challenge a person on their untapped gifts. For example, if I'm coaching Susan and I get a real sense that Susan really cares about people, I'll tell Susan, here's something that I'm getting from you. We've only been working together for a few sessions, but here's what I get from you. I feel that one of your untapped gifts is how much I feel you care about other people. I think that's a really unique quality. I don't think everybody cares about people the way you do. I think that's a real gift. So if you hear a person say something or do something or act in a certain way in your coaching session, tell them. Don't wait, tell them. Here's what you also want to do. You want to draw out what it is that they're thinking that maybe they don't really ever talk about. Many years ago, one of my coaches asked me this question, and it isn't in the framework, but you can steal it and use it. He said, Miles, what don't you want most people to know about you? What don't you want most people to know about you? And I remember being a bit overwhelmed because I didn't have an answer. And then because of the way he asked it and because of the trust that we had, I said, I don't want most people to know about me that I am often very bad at comparing myself to other people in a really negative way. Like I'm continuously looking at who out there is doing better than me. And that was the answer. Now I now know what that's about. That was about childhood and not having the nurturing and the love and the validation that I ultimately seeked. And through a lot of therapy and inner child work and shadow work, I've been able to get to the root of that. But I may never have got to the root of that if my coach hadn't asked me that question. You also want to get into their stories. And you want to get to a point where you have enough trust where you can challenge them on their stories. Joe Dispenza wrote a great book called The Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. And the whole premise of the book is that most people believe their stories. I can do this, I can't do that. I'm not as good as he, she, or they are. That's just stories. So what you want to do is you want to have the confidence to challenge people and challenge them on their stories. Like there's not that many truths in life. You know, one truth is we're all going to die one day. There's a morbid message. And we need oxygen to breathe. Stories, I believe I can't or can and can't do anything. A lot of people think they're true. They're not true. Whether you think you can be a great coach or a great public speaker is it's just a story. And most people are so unconscious to their stories, they don't realize that what you think you can and can't do is just story. You want to challenge that. And following on from that, similar kind of thing said a different way, you want to challenge their worldview. You want to help them see life bigger than maybe they currently see it. Because when they see life currently bigger than they currently see it, that's where they're really going to grow. Okay, moving on to the next one. Before I play this next one, here is a quick video which I think absolutely brilliantly sums up this next one. Here we go. Let me see if it will play. Let me see why this isn't playing. For whatever reason, it's not playing. But I'll find the video. I'll dig it out, and if we don't get it played for you today, we'll get it played. We'll get it played for you on day 2 or day 3. Okay, number 3, challenge. So here's what you want to do. You want to 10x their thinking. So a bit like what we've been talking about already, you want to challenge their worldview, you want to challenge their stories, and you want to 10x their thinking. What that means is you want to get them to think bigger than they maybe are currently thinking about themselves and about their life. So in, I think, session 4 or 5, there is a session which does this for you. And the point of that session is it gets people to think about their life through a 10x lens. Grant Cardone wrote a great book, I highly recommend it, called The 10x Rule. And basically what he states is the best way for us to achieve our goals is to think 10 times bigger. For example, let's say you had a goal to run 3 miles because you'd never done that before. The 10x version of that goal wouldn't be to run 30 miles. 10x version of that goal might just be to run a marathon. Let's say your goal was to be to build a successful coaching practice. Your 10x goal might be to build a successful coaching practice that has a team of 5 coaches that work under you in 5 different languages around the world, for example. So 10x doesn't necessarily mean 10 times. It means to get them to think bigger about the way they currently look at their life. Following on from that, I love this, is you want to get them to start setting some impossible goals. Here's the thing. Most people think the purpose of a goal is to hit a goal. And if you ever had the experience, as I have, of hitting a goal and being disappointed, the reason we get disappointed when we hit a goal is because the goal wasn't big enough. What we want to do, we want to recognize that the purpose of a goal is not actually to obtain the goal. The purpose of a goal is to grow. The ego wants to hit the target. But what the soul wants is to grow. So, for example, the ego wants the gold medal in the Olympics. What the soul wants is to just run faster than they've ever ran. Because here's an interesting thing. What's better, winning the gold medal and running slower than you've ran before, or not winning the gold medal and running faster than you've ever run? The ego will say it's better to win the gold medal. The soul will say it's better to run faster than you ran before. It's kind of like when Sage, my little girl, gets a gold star at school for work. I'm less interested in the gold star and more interested in her dedication and application to the work. You guys getting this? Is this making sense? I know I'm not live, but I'm hoping you're kind of nodding in agreement. So we want to challenge people to set goals that are outside of their comfort zone, because that's where they're going to grow. Next, we want to get people to rethink the order of their human needs. According to Tony Robbins, we have 6 human needs. You want to write these down. Need number 1 is certainty. Need number 2 is variety. Need number 3 is significance. Need number 4 is connection. Need number 5 is growth. Need number 6 is contribution. Most people, their highest human need is certainty, because their inner child wants to feel safe and secure. The problem is, if our first primary need is certainty, we stay in our comfort zone and we will not achieve the kind of life that we want. So for us to achieve the life that we want, our primary need needs to be growth. And the fact that you're here in this training is perfect, because you're here because you want to grow. And our second need needs to be contribution. So the bottom line is this: the secret to a great life is to ensure that you're consciously growing and you're consciously thinking, how can I help other people grow? And the beautiful thing about being a coach is, for you to be a successful coach, you've got to keep growing, got to keep doing your personal development, got to keep working with your coach, got to keep working with your mentor. And then you've got to be thinking, how can I put this value back out into the world? The reason why I love having the life coach training business is because now I get to coach you, and I get to see you become coaches, and the ripple effect out in the real world. When it was just me coaching, I was only really impacting the people that I was coaching. But now I'm impacting the people I'm coaching, and I'm impacting you, because you're now going to go out and coach more people, and vice versa. So you want to be focusing on, make sure if you wrote those human needs down, you want to focus on growth and contribution. Growth and contribution want to become your driving force for your life moving forward, and you want to encourage your clients to focus on the same. Next, you want to slow the client's roll. What that means is, one of my coaching mentors taught me this many years ago. He says, sometimes in life, Miles, you need to slow down to speed up. What happens, team, if you're in traffic and it's back-to-back traffic on the motorway and you put your foot on the accelerator? What happens? You crash, right? So there's a time for going fast and there's a time for going slow. For me, in my life, there's a time for, like I did this morning, there's a time for playing tennis with Sati, and there's a time for lifting weights and going for a run and doing a HIIT class. And then there's time for meditation. There's time for having a nap. There's time for breath work. There's time for yoga. There's time for introspective journaling. There's a time for sleep. So if you've got a client that's fast, slow them down. If you've got a client that's slow, speed them up. Bring some fun in, interrupt their patterns. If you get a client arrive at a coaching session and they're in the low energy, interrupt the pattern. Say, Susan, right before we start this session, let's make sure we've got the right energy for the session. I wonder if you can, Susan. I wonder if you can. Stand up. Here's what we're going to do. I want you to do 30 star jumps. I'll do them with you. You ready? Let's do it. 3, 2, 1, go. And then we do the 30 star jumps. Now, say, Susan, how do you feel now versus how you felt before? She'll go, oh, yeah, I feel good now. Okay, cool. Let's get into the session. If a client comes in, they're already fast, I'll say, Susan, before we begin the session, let's get ourselves in the right state for the session. I wonder if you can, please close your eyes. With your eyes closed, I want you to take 10 deep breaths, deeper than you've taken all day. And on the out breath, just say to yourself in your mind the word release. And that's going to symbolize you releasing any worry, stress, thoughts, tension that might have been in your mind coming into this call. I'll do this with you. 3, 2, 1, let's go. And then we'll do the 10 deep breaths. I'll say, how do you feel now versus how you felt before? And then we begin the session. Great thing to do at the beginning of a session. If your client comes in slow, low energy, low vibration, get them out of their seat, get them moving. If the client comes in high energy, slow them down, get them to close their eyes and do maybe 10 deep diaphragmatic breaths. Okay, number 4, leadership. This is an important lesson, serving versus pleasing. Here's what I've learned. Most rookie coaches please their clients, meaning they say the things that they think the client would want to hear. And the reason they do that is because they're worried that if they don't do that, the client may cancel. Here's the thing. If you don't do that, you're not really serving the client. All you're doing is trying to keep the client. And if you're doing that in your coaching, where else are you doing that in your life? We're not here to please. One of my mentors would say, Miles, when you're a coach, you're not there to be their friend. You're actually there to be their best friend. And what do best friends sometimes do? They tell you the truth. They give you tough love. So if you hear, said with love, if you hear bullshit, if you hear something that you think is out of integrity, then you need to tell that person, something about what you just said doesn't sit right with me. Because earlier you said this and what you just said contradicts that. So when I say serving, what I mean is if you hear contradictions in what a person says, well, Susan, you said to me that you're really committed to exercise, but yeah, we've been here 3 sessions now and you haven't prioritized that. Now let's kind of cut through the surface level stuff of traffic and not having the right clothes and blah, blah, blah. What's really going on? What's really underneath that? Because you said in the previous session, this isn't the first time that you've said you're going to exercise and you haven't done it. What's really going on? Let me tell you, team, your client will have massive respect for you when you do that. You're not there to be their therapist, team. You're there to coach them. You're there to hold them to a higher standard. You're there to challenge them to play a bigger game. And the only way you can do that is if you serve them and don't please them. So that means you've got leaning into the next point is you've got to tell the truth. A big part of being a great coach for me is you've got to be in integrity yourself. You make sure you're walking the walk, not just talking the talk. Make sure you're doing your own work yourself. Because the only way that you can get your clients to do that with you is if you tell the truth for you. Next, here's what you want to do. Earlier, I said you want to challenge the client's beliefs. What you also want to do is you want to help integrate new beliefs. So if a client gives you a story, I don't believe I can, I would love to do public speaking, but I don't believe I could do that. Work have asked me to do a presentation. I don't believe I can do it. Here's what I would sometimes do. I'd say, here's what I want you to do, Susan. Close your eyes. And I want you to picture yourself in a room at work delivering a presentation. You're at the front of the room. You're smiling. You're happy. You're loving it. The audience are loving it. If you're there now, how does it feel? If you were delivering that presentation, you were delivering it well, what would you say to yourself? If you just delivered that presentation, you went home to the people that you love and you delivered that in spite of fear, what would your friends and family say? How would your life look different if you knew that you now had the confidence to do presentations like that over and over and over again? Here's what you need to know, Susan. Whether you believe you can or can't do that comes down to what you see in your mind. You have to see it before you do it. That's a little bit of how I would help integrate a new belief into a person is I get them to close their eyes and I get them to do what I call KAV. Kinesthetic, how would that feel? How will that feel? Audio, what would you say to yourself? What would your friends and family say? And visual, how would your life look different when you know that you now have that skill? Next, 360 vulnerability. So I had a coaching client yesterday, and we were talking about the inner child. There was something that came up in the session without disclosing the details. And I basically said, I understand where you're coming from. I had a therapist not that long ago, and what came up for me was my inner child felt unseen and unsafe from the way that was raised, my upbringing, my dad wasn't there, blah, blah, blah. And I've realized that what I need to do is I need to spend time with my inner child. And here's how I do it. There's a particular meditation that I do. And I found that by spending time with my inner child every morning, I have more confidence to go out in the world and do what I want to do, because the man in me can only come out if the child in me feels safe. So that's what I mean by vulnerability. Or, I have a long-standing issue with eczema. It's under control. I know the food allergies I've got. I know the immune issues that I've got, all that kind of stuff, right? And if I'm having a day where my skin's not good and my client says, "Hey, Miles, how are you?" I'll go, yeah, my skin's bothering me today. But other than that, I'm all good. But yeah, it's a little bit itchy today, but is what it is. Here's the thing, coaches, you don't need to wear a mask. Okay, you don't need to pretend that your life is perfect and everything is figured out. You don't need to pretend like everything in your life is great all of the time if it isn't. Brene Brown says this. She said, vulnerability is our greatest asset. So you don't need to pretend like life is amazing if it isn't. Be vulnerable. Vulnerability is a superpower. And then 200% relationship. What that really means, that doesn't mean that you give them your phone number and they can text you at midnight. That just means that you give them 100% and they give you 100%. And there's an agreement that you're going to give them 100%. You're going to be open, you're going to be honest, you're going to be vulnerable, and they're going to commit to doing the same. And then number 5 is strategy. Number 1, strategy over tactics. I'm all for high performance habits. But before I ever give a client a habit, I want to first get to the root of what's really underneath it that's prevented the habit from working in the first place. For example, when I used to sell fitness for a living, if a person said to me, pretending her name was Susan again, that she wanted to join, she'd been a member of 3 gyms before, and in every occasion, she'd kind of been there for a few months and then she just kind of lost the motivation. Rookie coaches would just sign the person up and just give them a new plan. The most successful coach would get to the underlying reason why that person has tried 3 times and failed. So, for example, I had a call recently and a client said, I've had times in my life where I've been successful and then I stop. The rookie coach would say, okay, so you just need the right habits and tools, and you need the right accountability tracker, and you need reminders on your phone, and you need a coach to make sure you do what you say you're going to do. That's what rookie coaches would do. Here's what the most successful coaches will do. The most successful coaches, which is what I did, and by the way, I'm not being arrogant, I'm not trying to impress you, I'm trying to impress upon, I'm just modeling what works, is what I did instead is I go, successful, then stop. That says to me procrastination, self-sabotage, lack of motivation. I've learned that if anybody has any of those 3 patterns, that is about the inner child. All procrastination, self-sabotage, lack of motivation is an inner child with unmet needs. Is an inner child that feels unseen, unsoothed, unnurtured, unwanted, unloved. And little child that doesn't feel safe does not want to go out and take action. It wants to hide under the covers and stay safe and play small. So if any of you have ever had those experiences, that is what you need to heal. You need to heal your inner child. There's different meditations for this. You can ask me about this during Master Coach. You have to spend time with your inner child. And that is exactly what I would do. And that's what I did with this client. I've got her to close her eyes. I've got her to visualize her inner child. What would her inner child say? I've got her to visualize herself as a coach from the future. And what would she say? We then did this process, this gold light process, where I got her to imagine that she was integrating her inner coach and her child self, brought them together, and we integrated. We had tears, and everything was better. That's the difference between strategy and tactics. Okay, next is about environment. So one of the key things I've learned, one of my coaching mentors, Coach Dan, taught me this many years ago. He said, environment dictates performance. What that means is there may be areas of your client's life where they want to grow, they want to improve, but if they don't have the right environment, it's going to be very difficult. For example, let's imagine that your client doesn't have a supportive partner. It can be very difficult for that person to grow because they don't have a supportive environment. So one of the things we really want to challenge our clients on is if they don't currently have a supportive environment, we want to challenge them to get themselves in more supportive environments. For example, if you're a coach and you want to be a successful coach, one of the biggest things I found, and I probably spent over £50,000 in mentorship and mastermind groups over the years, is the environment that you're in really does dictate your performance. If you want to grow as a coach, you want to spend time with more successful coaches. If you want to get fit, you want to spend time with people that are fitter. If you want to be more successful in any area, spend time with people who already achieve what you want to achieve. So you want to be encouraging your client to spend more time in places, environments with people who are playing a bigger game. Next, front loading. What this means is you want to really start off your coaching program with your client by giving them habits, tools, rituals, strategies that are going to help to give them momentum. So, for example, if they are a person who is regularly on social media and that is not making them feel good about themselves, then an example of front loading would be to give them a challenge for 7 days to not go on social media for the first and the last hour of the day. Another habit might be to get them to create a timer on their phone where they can only go on social media for 20 minutes a day, right? And when that timer runs out, they can't use it again. These are examples of things that, let's imagine that the social media thing is the issue. That is a tactical thing that could give them a front loading benefit that straight away can compound where other areas of their life get better. Their sleep gets better, relationship with their significant other, if they've got one, gets better, and so on and so forth. So that's what we mean by front loading. Next, external learning. What this means is we don't want a coaching client who is codependent. We don't want to be creating codependence. The point of view as a coach is to guide and assist the person to make their life better. And so we don't want them just relying on your coaching session with them once a week or once a fortnight or once a month, whenever it is. We want to encourage them to be reading, watching YouTube videos, listening to podcasts, doing all kinds of learning so that they can make their life better outside of the coaching experience. So a bit like you as a coach, we want to make sure that you are also learning and growing and listening to podcasts and reading books and all that kind of stuff. We want to make sure that you are encouraging your clients to do that as well. And then the last point really is very, very simple. Less is better. What that means is you want to be really conscious that when you're with a client, less is better. What that means is don't feel like you've always got to be giving them tools and habits and rituals and things that are going to revolutionize their life. You don't actually have to do that. A lot of the time really is less really is better.